Hey, it is Wednesday. Welcome back to another episode of Go FUD Yourself. Today, good friend of mine, Bolon. How you doing, buddy?
Doing well. How about yourself?
Amazing, thank you. We'll get into DeFi Kingdoms in a minute, but quickly, just for the people that are tuning in at the very beginning, today we got a ton of stuff to talk about. First, we're going to start off with Solana. We're going to talk a little bit about their outage on February 6th, so yesterday, and what that looks like. We're going to talk about some trading airdrop points that Solana is doing and their chapter 2 of their Saga phone and what that means. We'll talk a little bit about the pre-orders. Then we're going to move over to Sui. Sui has made some incredible progress in the last year, and it's definitely really interesting to chat about that. We're going to talk about Flare and its price appreciation in the last little bit. And we're going to talk about Avalanche and the doom and gloom unlock of 350 million and change of AVAX happening on the 22nd of February, which we will talk about. And lastly, if we have time, if Bolon doesn't go off track the whole call, because it's usually him and not me, we're going to talk about AI and DeFi and if there's a synergistic future, what we think about it, maybe some missed opportunities from 2023. It's going to be super exciting. So let's freaking go. All right. First time seeing the new video. What do you think?
It was awesome. It was. I was enjoying it. I was like, "Oh, this is new." No, that was great.
Yeah, they did a good job. I like the Gary Gensler and then the
And then the sad.
So funny. All right. So before we jump into it, because we got a lot to cover, but quickly, I mean, obviously you're a big part of DeFi Kingdoms. Just for the people that don't know, if they've been living under a rock for the last little while, what is DeFi Kingdoms?
Yeah, DeFi Kingdoms is a cross-chain MMORPG. So you play with your heroes. You can have your heroes do things like quest or craft, as well as combat. So we do actually have our first combat experience is live currently. We're progressing towards our second one, which is actually getting pretty close. We have a tracking sheet out that our community has been following progress as we develop everything. It's in testing now. And basically it's a very, very strategic turn-based combat. So if you think old school RPGs, as you can see from behind me, we are a pixel art, nostalgia-based game. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, really cool strategies involved, very, very detailed heroes with different abilities and dynamic stats, a lot you can do there.
Which is, for us, like, smooth brains, I'm going to bulk myself in that category. What's really cool about it is it's essentially a DeFi, right? Swapping and eventually, expanding into lending and a bunch of other stuff and continuing to expand, I should say.
Yep.
And on top of that is this really cool immersive game that gives you benefits for your DeFi activities and so on. Yep. It's really cool. If you're not familiar with DeFi Kingdoms, I would suggest checking them out. I've been a fan of you guys since the beginning, and it's really cool. And you've also dealt with a lot of adversity, which I think is maybe a topic for an entire podcast.
It could easily take one, yeah. So, and I will say too, like, I look at it kind of like League of Legends, just because I'm a nerd and I play a lot of League of Legends. Super easy to get into. If you want to be the best, you're gonna have to learn some stuff. Yeah. But if even just if you're more of a casual gamer, which I tend to, I'm hard stuck bronze in League. I am definitely a casual gamer. It's still very easy to get started and learn as you go.
And it's not stinking expensive like a lot of other of these Web3 games are. It's really cool. So anyways, let's move on a little bit, although I could probably talk about DeFi Kingdoms all day. But so yesterday, and this isn't new. So this is something we've been talking about for years. Solana, for all of its good points, has had a significant problem with outages. And some of the outages are caused by, obviously, security concerns, and it's a forced outage. Some of it is the chain broke or an upgrade broke or different things broke. The challenge with Solana I mean, it's not a challenge, it's just an observation, I guess, is when the chain halts, it's down for a long time. And yesterday was no different. It was 5 hours where the entire chain essentially stopped. What do you think about that? Is that something that's been on your radar with Solana? Does it matter? Is it just part of novel tech? Where are you at on this one?
A little bit of both. You know, I do think that to an extent, yes, some hiccups are expected. You know, it does seem like they responded, you know, relatively quickly. Like it took 5 hours to get it back up. But at least they were, you know, on it and said, hey, we know it's out. We're fixing it. We're working on it now. So the responsiveness to me is very reassuring, just that, you know, they're paying attention and they want to make sure that it's not an ongoing issue. You know, like I said, hiccups are expected, but at the same time, like that can be very impactful, right? Especially for the dApps that are on the chain. And the level of impact depends on how integrated the dApp is with the chain. But, you know, especially for, you know, fully projects, so DEXs, you know, any games that are, you know, more on chain, they're just down for 5 hours.
Well,
and that's not great.
To make matters worse, imagine you had positions and risk on somewhere. I mean, 5 hours is a long time in crypto if something happens. I mean, yes. I don't think that 5 hours yesterday had a ton of volatility outside of Solana.
No, not really.
But I mean, it very well could. 5 hour outage, you could find yourself liquidated without even an ability to get out of it. As soon as the Oracle updates, when the network comes back on, boom. So to Solana's defense, the outage was caused by a tech problem in this particular case, and in most cases. And then what you have to do is you have to push an upgrade, an update to all the validators. And they have to install a new software pack, which is why, in Solana's case, it takes so freaking long because they have to try to get all the validators to actually, or enough of the validators to download this software package. So over the years that Solana has been around, that I've been following these outages and stuff, it definitely has gotten better. They're getting better at getting a hold of the validators and so on. But one of the challenges with decentralization is that you don't just have a business you can phone up like Google and say, hey, why are all my servers down? That's the an indirect parallel. But anyways, so to their credit, or to their defense, I suppose, you know, it's not their fault. It could have been fixed in 30 minutes, but they haven't got a good enough system yet of communicating or pushing updates to the validators. And
that really is one of the risks that you take with, you know, open and more decentralized chains, is you don't control the chain. So if your validators don't update, you're just kind of dead in the water.
Which I think, I mean, it's a trade-off, and I think it outweighs that cost is outweighed by the benefits, I think, of decentralization and trustlessness.
I generally agree with that, but it definitely, like, it has to be set up with caution and set up correctly. And a lot of it's volume. You know, if you have, like, we have DFK chain, our Avalanche subnet, and right now it is still closed. We are the only ones that can validate it. We run 8 validators. Well, if we open it and we stay at that same 8 validators, it doesn't take much to cause a problem. But if you can get to, you know, I think Avalanche C chain has like 1,300 or 1,400 validators. Well, it's a hell of a lot easier at that point because each validator has a much smaller weight. So you have to get to more validators, but you have to get to a smaller ratio of validators. And so there's kind of a trade-off there as well of, like, you know, being decentralized has a lot of benefits. And I tend to agree that I think it outweighs the downsides. But you need volume, you need scale, you need security.
Well, and we have to evolve the tech, right? I mean, always. These are things that in novel technologies are always prevalent. In this case, it's just magnified by the financial impact because it's not just a technology that might break. It's a technology that might not work and could directly cost you a significant amount of money. So we as operators need to be responsible and conscious of this. You know, what is always hilarious about Solana, and Solana to me is a bit of an enigma, because no matter what, people still hold Solana. Like after all this 5-hour outage, the price dropped 5%. If that was any other blockchain, it'd be like 40%. Like it's so strange how Solana just maintains, like even when the NFT space died and Solana DeFi essentially died, Solana's price stayed relatively consistent. It's very strange. It doesn't make any sense to me, but they have a really loyal community that has drank the Kool-Aid.
Yes.
And so speaking of their loyal community, I'm not as good at transitions as Kiara is. But, this whales market, which is a novel protocol, has really changed how you can participate in this kind of airdrop craziness, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. So it's well, have you heard of this before, Bolon? Have you heard of
Not really. No, I hadn't heard of it prior to this, but I mean, it's an interesting idea. It gives people a way to, farm airdrops and then kind of pre-cash them in. It definitely puts some additional risk on whoever's buying them, because you don't know what's going to happen after that airdrop. So you're kind of taking on all the risk at that point. I have mixed feelings in terms of airdrop hunting. I get it; it's effective. I understand why people do it, but I also feel like there's a lot in that sector that airdrop hunt and dump. Airdrop hunt and dump, and like they're only going for the airdrop to immediately dump it all, which can be dangerous for a project. So it's something that projects have to keep in mind when they're running these airdrops. Of yes, you're getting people's attention, but don't think that every person whose attention you're getting is going to stay.
It's going to be useful, yeah. So I mean, there's a stickiness factor, right? So these airdrops, and whether we like it or not, Jito is another example on Solana that just went bananas from some of their airdrop speculation and some of their like make your TVL deposits now, and there's a cap, and the cap gets increased and everybody piles on. Eigenlayer had a similar experience. Arbitrum. I mean, a lot of these ecosystems that have catapulted recently had airdrop frenzy. And so a certain proportion, and arguably an unattractive proportion, probably is vulturistic in a sense. They're just chasing these things, and people are making crazy money off these airdrops if you do it right. But from a project perspective, it's still kind of what is your macro CAC, the customer acquisition cost. And I mean, if it still makes business sense, I suppose it's okay. But the airdrops to me are just a gimmick. It's a gimmick of creating artificial value and FOMO and momentum. But I think it's dumb. I don't think it's going to last forever, but it's working and people are still, all over it. So
right now, I would say it's probably the most effective way to get attention in crypto. Whether it should be or not, it's a different story, but I would say it is.
Yeah, again, like it's kind of like my thesis on liquidity mining. I hate it, but I mean, you can't be the only one not doing it, because if your philosophy is aligned, people are going to go where the yield is. Period. And so I think over time, as the space evolves, we're going to continue to see the max drawdown and the max volatility, eventually come down. And I think we're going to see a lot less of these gimmicks and a lot more focus on reasonable, sustainable, predictable revenue. We're not there yet, though. So right now we're still focused on momentum and narratives and FOMO and all this other crap as a space. But that does not make a mature market, for sure. So hopefully we can get through this cycle a little bit. But in the meantime, protocols like this whales market, they had 40 million in trades of pre-market tokens. So effectively what you're doing is you're selling your interest in something you bought prior to the token launch. And in exchange, you're getting all the accumulated airdrops and all the other nonsense that allocation would be entitled to. So, and the price of whales market has gone bananas. It's cool because it's a novel, it's a new idea. Right. This airdrop and yield kind of aggregation is actually becoming a thing. If you have USDC, for example, this is a random example, you hold USDC in your wallet, there's probably 150 options of where you can put that USDC. And very few ways to compare and contrast. So a lot of these groups like Whales Market, and there's others, that are kind of aggregating this and creating kind of a user process to identify these things, I think is great. And then making the opportunities to purchase and to exit and enter into these assets even prior to market launch is pretty interesting. Okay, any final thoughts on whales market?
I think it's a really interesting idea that we haven't seen yet. So kudos for that.
And it's obviously picking up steam.
Yep.
So I mean, regardless of what we think about it, people are using it. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
In terms of let's wait and see how it goes, I was a huge naysayer. Okay. I mean, we're talking a little bit about Solana today. Truthfully, I haven't been the biggest Solana fan ever. I don't love Solana Rust because it deviates from natural Rust. So it requires a lot of careful thought and preparation. Anyways, I'm whatever. Anyways, I haven't been super excited about Solana. It's really hard to get your developers up to speed in a meaningful way. It's just, there's a lot of tooling that took forever. And so it kind of came out of favor for me. That being said, I was a big naysayer of the Saga phone. I was like, what? It came out during peak bull when everybody else was talking about like other things. And all of a sudden Solana's like, yeah, we're pivoting and building a phone. And I was like, what? Now they have announced chapter 2. Where are we going? Oh yeah. So they announced chapter 2. Now the carousel on this one, it is similar to what we were talking about before, but the point of this article is its relation to and response from the outage yesterday. But anyways, the Saga 2 is coming out in the next little bit. They've got 60,000 pre-orders. Now, 60,000 sounds like a lot, and it is for crypto. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something that is actually sustainable? Do you think there's a business to be had here, or kind of where are you at?
So I want to say yes, because I think it would be really cool. The reality, in my opinion, is probably not. So I actually worked in cell phones for a long time prior to becoming a crypto degen. But, realistically, you're not going to get through to iPhone people. Your only hope is that they carry a second phone now. And I mean, I could see an angle there, but I think you need to take that approach of this is a crypto device. Don't put your phone number on it, which honestly would be better for security anyway. Just buy this phone as a handheld crypto device and use it that way. So I could see that angle. But as far as like actually overtaking market share, I mean, between Apple and Samsung, there ain't a whole lot of market share left.
Yeah, there's an interesting. It's kind of interesting.
It would be really hard to get into there and really like gain critical mass. And then aside from that, just, at the price points that the phones are listed at, and I don't know much about the phones themselves, just basing this off of price point. I think people need to make sure that their expectations are in line with what that device is. Doesn't mean it's bad, but I think this one's like $350 or something like that.
Yeah.
It's not going to be an iPhone 14. Like, got to keep that in mind.
Yeah. I mean, excuse me. So I definitely don't think they're trying to cater to like Western markets,
right?
Because Western markets are obviously dominated by the perception of getting a phone for free,
yes,
which is not what happens. But obviously, that's what the users think. So, anyways, I think this is a little bit more geared towards kind of emerging-ish markets who maybe wouldn't naturally have cell phones with this capability. You could also see it as like somewhat of an alternate or additional layer of security to a ledger.
Yeah,
so it's a different device and it needs a ledger possibly. So there's some interesting things you can do there. I'm just not sure if I think the demand will be there and will slowly grow over time. I'm concerned about their ability to maintain supply chain because 60,000 units. I mean, they're not ordering a big enough amount to have consistent orders in. So everything will be done with a pre-order, prepayment, and then wait.
Yep.
And so my concern with that is
people don't like to wait.
People don't like to wait at all, especially for an indeterminate amount of time. Right? If you're like, hey, well, we got to fill this order first. When's that going to happen? I don't know. Then you kind of lock your money up and away you go. I can see the potential upside for this. I can see some speed bumps and friction, but good on them for trying because they're definitely biting off a a piece of a potentially poison apple. So good for them for taking
the other thing too that I'll be curious to see is if they do start to really grow, are they prepared for the lawsuits that will follow? Because they will.
Right. I mean, there's just so many moving parts in building a phone and an operating system, and like it's an Android phone, so it'll be tied into the Android App Store, but still, like there's just so many moving parts, so many things that can go wrong. And again, back to the point from before, as technologists, we have an extra, I think, order of magnitude of accountability, because if the phone doesn't work normally, you're annoyed. If the phone doesn't work and it costs you $50,000, you're more than annoyed.
Yes.
And so, but that's all of blockchain and crypto, right? Like we all have to think about that and take that very seriously as protocol owners. And you have to make best efforts, obviously. It's impossible to prevent everything.
Oh, of course. And especially on phones. I mean, how long was Samsung building phones when they put out the Note that's battery wanted to blow up? Yeah. They knew what they were doing. They weren't new to the space. Things happen, especially with tech. Yeah,
and I mean, same thing with like exploits and all that stuff. Like we all spend a hell of a lot of time focused on security and trying to make sure we're closing any exploit vectors. But it's inevitable that things are going to happen to the most experienced of teams. I know a lot of really amazing teams that ran into with enough time in the market and enough contracts put out there, eventually there's going to be something. And so, but we need to take that seriously as a space. Okay, let's move on from Solana, because we spent 2/3 of the episode on Solana today, and that's not very common for me. But what is exciting, and again, I'm being proven wrong here over and over and over again. In the last little bit, which is pretty standard. Kiara will tell you, just do the opposite of what I say. It's almost always right. But in this particular case, we're talking about Sui. And so when Sui and Aptos launched, I remember thinking, okay, two of damn near the same things launching at damn near the same time, kind of post-bull or end of bull, and with massive valuations. And I thought for sure it was going to be dump fest during the bear. Like I thought anytime there was an unlock, people were just going to dump, try to take money off the table before everybody else. Now, of course, some of that happened, but not near what I thought. And Sui in particular, we talked to Sui very early on about launching and supporting growth on the chain. And they didn't really have a focus on DeFi at all. They wanted to focus more on gaming and GameFi and culture and art and all that stuff. And they pivoted during the bear because I think they realized that the culture and art thing is downstream from DeFi. If DeFi is successful, then that shit will be successful. But generally speaking, it's not otherwise. And they've pivoted. And in the last year, they've skyrocketed to the top 10 in DeFi TVL, which is like not a small feat. Like we're getting some legitimate DeFi ecosystems now. We've got Base, Arbitrum, Optimism, you could argue Polygon, Avalanche, BNB Chain, Solana, now Sui. We're going to talk about another one of my favorites, Flare. We've got some really cool, really cool emerging technologies, Eigenlayer. There's a lot of really neat things that are coming out. And for Sui to be in good company like this after 1 year, I think is amazing. So the TVL surged over 1,000%, 10x in 4 months. Which is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's super impressive without a doubt, and kudos to them for pulling it off. Like it is absolutely incredible. I'll be curious to see how they're able to scale with Move. So not necessarily them as a blockchain, but Solidity I think is still the most commonly used language, followed by Rust, and then it's just like, hey, here's this new one. And so, you were talking about even with Solana that they have a modified Rust. So, your Rust developers have to learn the modified Rust. Well, now you're talking about, Solidity developers, Rust developers, or developers who have not done Solidity work yet, or contract work, having to learn a whole nother language. So I think there's promise there. It's not a matter of they can't do it. I'm just curious to see how it plays out and how many people will adopt that language.
Yeah, I mean, now that we're getting some of the ETH scaling and
Mhm.
Degen update is coming up soon, and dank sharding and a few other things that are going to make layer 2s a lot more performant.
Best name.
I know I struggle with dank sharding. It sounds ridiculous to me, but anyways, so there's a lot of ETH things going on that's really starting to optimize what you can do with ETH smart contracts. But the smart contract limit for Solidity in terms of storage size is really low, and there's a lot of things you just can't do. You just can't do with Solidity contracts. And so Rust is the next logical step of programming language. Move, in theory, is even more performant or creates more optionality in terms of what you can program and how. It's very similar to C, actually.
Okay.
Apparently.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on that because I couldn't tell you.
Me neither.
But apparently it's pretty close to C, which actually, in an odd way, opens up the doors to a hell of a lot more developers.
It does. It would make it a lot easier for people to learn it if that is the case. So, maybe they're onto something there.
Well,
it'll be very interesting to see. And the biggest thing is they need people moving it forward.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing that Solidity has going for it, realistically, is there are always new standards coming out because there's so many people using it. So, the diamond standard where you can, kind of merge contracts to get past that size limit, something that, that only came out like a year ago. So there's just always new advancements in it. And that's what Move is going to need, is to make sure that there are people who are pushing the language forward as well.
What's cool about it is, I mean, this all came from Facebook's DM. If you remember, most of the people that are on the leadership teams of Sui and Aptos are from DM. And Move was the DM programming language. So the only good thing is DM was like dominating the news in like 2018.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's been a solid 6-7 years of thought and development going into that, which doesn't mean that it's anywhere close to Ethereum, obviously.
No, but it's got some history.
Yeah, some live battle-tested history.
Right.
We'll have to see. I mean, I think I still struggle with seeing how anybody's going to make money on their valuation of what they were buying stuff at, but crazier things have happened.
Yep. Welcome to crypto.
Okay, so in the vein of talking about L1s that I think are going to be interesting, Flare, if you're unfamiliar with Flare, was originally based off of Avalanche. So it's a similar architecture and underlying blockchain to Avalanche, but they've made a buttload of changes that really are pretty cool, pretty interesting. And they had a unique approach where they decided to hitch their wagon to the XRP community, which has turned out to be insanely smart.
Yeah.
They have tons of wallets, tons of Flare distribution, and tons of people that are Ripple maxis that to date haven't had any simple tangential opportunities to participate in DeFi, because it doesn't really exist on Ripple, obviously.
Right.
And so, it's being received quite positively. I think, Flare obviously has had some announcements in the last week. They talked about Google Cloud providing infrastructure and operating a validator, which is exciting.
It's huge.
Yeah, I mean, just getting big tech names on board is huge.
It's massive. Yeah.
Yeah, that the price has gone up, obviously 44% in the last bit. It's still relatively low market cap, around $1 billion for an L1, but I mean, it's just getting started. So we're just going to see DeFi start to come out here in the next few months. So definitely check it out. I mean, if you're a builder, they're doing some really cool things. I know their team really well. They've got some pretty cool programs going on. They're definitely working on impactful liquidity mining initiatives and other important marketing items. Definitely worth checking out. Not financial advice. I'm biased, of course. I know them well. I know the tech well, but I think they're doing something really cool and definitely worth looking at. Have you used Flare at all?
I haven't used them. I know the name just from general life, but I have not actually used them. But I think and probably everybody else, I'm a big Avalanche fan, and so when Flare came out and was like, it's kind of similar. Like it's based on that, and it's like, okay,
well, it started as a fork, so it's pretty similar.
Right. Yeah. So I was like, I can get down with that. Like, okay, let's see what else you're doing. And they've made some pretty cool improvements. Google, obviously, like Google coming in is just insanely massive just across the board, no matter what.
Yeah.
Because it's Google, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, no, I think they have great potential, and I'm curious to see how it keeps developing.
Yeah,
I think Avalanche is a great choice to fork off of.
Yeah, if you had to pick a tech. But they're doing something really cool with what's called F assets. So they're going to have they have a decentralized way to natively deploy versions of XRP onto Flare, or Bitcoin Cash onto Flare, or all these other different all these other assets. They have a decentralized way to manage that, which is coming out pretty soon. It's called F assets. It's really cool. Another cool thing that they've done is they've kind of changed how you can delegate and earn yield on your Flare tokens. So you wrap it, and as long as it's wrapped, you get airdrops. You're eligible for, they're called Flare drops, which are lucrative and continue now still for 2 years. You also can delegate without locking your assets. So you can delegate voting power to validators, and you get a delegation yield for that too. It's quite compelling. They've built a lot of value proposition into the Flare token relative to most other L1 tokens.
Right.
The flip side is that it creates some obstacles for developers because you have to take all of that into account. So
yeah.
But anyways, it's really cool. I think they're doing enough meaningful, novel stuff that it's interesting. It's interesting because they really are trying to approach it. Anyways, I don't want to be a shill factory for Flare any more than I have to, but okay, we're going to rip through the last couple things because we're bumping up on time. But the first one is the Avalanche unlock. This to me is a giant freaking nothing burger, and I don't understand why it's even in the headlines. Yes, every quarter since Avalanche was launched, there's been a token unlock. Every quarter, there's some dumping before because everybody expects the unlock to dump. I totally disagree with that. Most people, if you are paying attention, know that we're on the upswing of a bull market, barely. And dumping at these prices at this particular time makes very little sense.
And it's 2.6% of the circulating supply.
Yeah.
Like it's not 50%. It's not double. Like it's less than 3%.
So things to think about. The people that are getting these unlocks, there's some public sale people I think that are still getting them. Depends on the tier you picked. But generally, these are venture partners also. And so generally, if they are going to sell, they're not going to market dump. So they might sell them, but over the course of a certain period of time to make sure they don't cause their own drawdown, et cetera, et cetera. So if you look at these historically, there's always some weird, unexpected volatility. Don't expect it for sure to dump after, because often that's already been priced in by the time that the unlock happens. And sometimes it just goes up. So anyways, the point is, it's a time of really unpredictable volatility. So just pay attention, but I wouldn't be stressing about it. Like, I don't think it's going to cause catastrophic contagion in the space or anything. It's a lot of money. If 345 million was market dumped, yeah. I mean, of course
that would be a problem, but the odds of that are not high.
Yeah. I don't know why the PR wires are poo-pooing on AVAX. It's common for some reason.
But the Durango update will be pretty cool from what I've heard. It's all about like cross-chain messaging, should open some additional doors there. So I'm excited for the upgrade. It happens every quarter.
It's really the upgrade is adding a lot to Avalanche warp messaging, which is allowing, not yet, but is allowing for much more efficient subnet to subnet communication and composability between subnets. So it's not atomic yet, but they're building methods for composability across subnets, which again is such an integral part of the subnet architecture. So very exciting. Okay. Lastly, we're going to end on a bit of a lighter note. AI in DeFi, is there a synergistic future that awaits? Now, this article claims that there's a very synergistic future for DeFi and AI, and there's transformative futures. And I think, actually, I'm going to get your opinion on this one first. They're suggesting that you can have greater security, greater efficiency, more personalized financial solutions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What do you think? Do you think AI is going to revolutionize DeFi, or are we a little premature on that one?
Yeah, I mean, it might revolutionize DeFi in like 10 years.
Yeah.
But today, I no, I don't think so. AI is one of those things where like it's really cool in concept. Also, it's probably going to kill us all eventually, but that's fine. But with where AI is at today, if a project were launching and said our contracts were written by AI and audited by AI, I would run away. That's just me, not financial advice. Do whatever you want.
Yeah.
But it's not at a point where I trust AI. Especially in financial matters. Like, it's still learning. That's one of the cool things about AI, and why it will eventually kill all of us, is that it learns on its own, and so it continues to gather more information. And I know this made the point about like blockchain being transparent gives it access to more information, which is also true, but like it better be bulletproof if we're building protocols based on AI. Like, it's got to be better than it is today.
So we were talking about this before the pod, to a certain extent, and like, I think AI for DeFi at some point in the future will be incredibly compelling. I think there's a lot of promise for what AI can do. Part of the reason I want to talk about this today is there's been a lot of venture money that's flowed into AI related projects, and now we're seeing some combinations of AI and DeFi. But what we were talking about before is before the podcast is how in this particular space of emerging tech plus financial products, it creates a whole new dimension of risk and consideration when you're deploying these technologies. So as an example, if I had a SaaS product that was my contact management system and maybe sent out an accidental email or didn't send an email properly or deleted all my contacts unexpectedly, all of those things would really suck and would cause some crisis management. But in our case, if the technology fails, it could be millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. And, we have to take that seriously. And I think, to your point, AI is still premature in a lot of ways. If you use ChatGPT or any of the other versions, it's amazing in a lot of ways already. It's mind-blowing that we have technology that can do that, but it hallucinates still. It's drunk like a quarter of the time.
Well, and if you go to the ChatGPT subreddit, you can see a ton of screenshots where if you just reword your question, it will tell you things that it is not supposed to tell you.
Yeah.
So are we adding that? Like, if I word the question right, what kind of information, it has to be more secure and more accurate than it is today.
Well, and this to me, we need to figure out the liability of this thing. So maybe our AI czar, Kamala Harris, will get on top of this. Somehow I doubt it. But we have to figure out like where the responsibility actually lies. So as an example, if I layered AI on my application, who's responsible for erroneous information, them or us? And maybe both. I don't know. Like, who has the responsibility to ensure the validity of the data?
Right.
I don't know. And so I think there's like, before we're going to see any meaningful movement here or anybody willing to actually use AI on DeFi, you have to know that there's some safeguards and some accountability and protective layers in there, that you're not just a giant, I don't know, petri dish of an experiment. So I think it'll be interesting. I mean, again, to your point, I wouldn't use what AI says from a financial perspective. Someday, absolutely, AI will be able to say, hey, given all the information we know about you and the fact that I can see everything in your phone and I know all your spending habits, here's what you should do and here's why. Yeah, eventually we'll get there. But we're surely not there now. So
no.
Anyways, all right, brother, we've gone over. Thank you all who are watching live for staying late with us. Usually, and most of the time, it's a 30-minute show, Monday to Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. We've reduced our venues now to have a bigger impact on those venues. So we currently stream to YouTube Live. We do a whole bunch of shorts on YouTube, and then we do Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So like, share, subscribe, help us get the word out. And today, my man, I say to you, go FUD yourself.